Hey guys. How you doing? All right. So, my name is Rucht Lilaviva. I am the director of tabletop panels here at DragonCon. We've done this for a long time now, and thank you guys for coming. That's why we keep doing this. Okay, so we're here to talk about the X-Wing Miniatures game. You know how? Okay, you know that game is kind of successful right now, right?
Yeah. 40K. What?
By all metrics, it's selling. Okay, you have Warhammer 40K at the top. Then you have X-Wing Miniatures. Then you have Armada. And then you have Privateer Press. That's a big deal. Okay, so we have someone over here who might know a little bit about that. I'll let Jay Little introduce himself.
Okay, well, I guess then I will introduce myself. I'm Jay Little. Thanks. I thought I was going to do Hi, I'm Jay Little. I'm fortunate enough to be the lead designer for X-Wing Miniatures. By lead designer, I was the one who created basically everything that you see in the core set, as well as the infrastructure and the mechanics that went on to allow the rest of the team to go on and basically develop everything that you've seen up until now, including, of course, who's already gone out and rushed out and got the core set for Force Awakens.
Somebody else buy it for me.
Dark. All right. So designing X-Wing, as many of you can probably imagine, was pretty cool. So, unfortunately, because of the way that Fantasy Flight Games works, and I was really, really fortunate to be able to work with them on this, there are some things that I simply can't talk about. And I want to make sure that it's clear with everybody for that in case you were hoping to be able to get that sort of information. I just want to make that clear up front. So for example, it's their policy, and I'm completely cool with why they do this too. If it's not on their website, it cannot be discussed. They have a very, very tight public relations policy about that, kind of like Blizzard does, because they really need to be in control of that, particularly with Star Wars and those products, because Lucasfilm is involved. I also want to make sure that it's clear to you too that right now I'm a freelancer. I spent 5 wonderful years with Fantasy Flight Games. But a couple years back, I had a stroke, and the health issues that arose from that, I wasn't able to work full-time anymore, so now I'm actually working as a freelancer, but I have a wonderful relationship with them. I just am not an official voice speaking for Fantasy Flight Games, so I just want to make sure that that's clear as well. But I've got a great relationship with them, and so they and I are in an arrangement, and I do talk about what I've been able to do with them, and they're happy and they're fine with that, which is great, because I can't wait to be able to get back there and work with you again. So just want that out. If that's disappointing to you, either too bad, because I'm pretty sure we locked the doors, fire hazard. But I really hate to disappoint people if they had certain expectations. You also may hear one of the most frequent answers that you will hear at a convention if Fantasy Flight Games there, which is, that's a great question. Why don't you visit www.fantasyflightgames.com for any information about upcoming games? Because that's also the standard boilerplate for anything that I cannot answer. All right?
But that's okay. That's why me and Spencer are here.
Yeah. Perfect.
Fantasy Flight does not employ me, so I'm going to talk about it.
I can neither confirm nor deny any.
You're off the hook, Jay. All right, Spencer, you're from what website?
CoolMiniOrNot.
Yes. So tell us about CoolMiniOrNot.
We're not Fantasy Flight Games, we're not Privateer Press, and we're not Games Workshop. So all those people you heard about at the top of the panel, we're none of them. We do a couple things. CoolMiniOrNot.com is our painting website. It's a community for people who like to paint miniatures. It's kind of like Hot or Not from back in the day. You're old, remember that website?
Oh yes, I remember.
Before you could make money on Instagram posting your hot pictures, you just went there to feel better about yourself. It's just for miniature painters, and you go there and rate miniatures. You can put your stuff up and have it rated. Usually you're going to get like a 5 because you're not any good. The community will tell you that. But also we are a publisher, and we publish a game called Zombicide, as well as Rum and Bones is our new recent like Dota MOBA style game.
Which you can play, by the way, downstairs in the basement level.
That's my job, dog. Come on, man.
Hey, I'm here for you.
X-Wing down there.
Yeah, so there's X-Wing down there too. So, see, I was just back it up. Cross-pollinate.
Synergy.
Oh, yeah. If if I don't get a job at FSD out of this, I don't know what I'm doing here, man. As a joke, I'm super good where I'm at. So yeah, so we do board games with highly detailed plastic pieces, basically.
And a great thing here is there are certain things about the development process that I simply can't speak on. So it's great to have him here as a resource on miniatures because, of course, one of the greatest appeals about the game and really a big reason why X-Wing is so successful is the detail and the quality of those miniatures, and that's something that Spencer can speak to far more than I can for many reasons.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up, we're going to talk about the development of the game, something that Jay can talk about, and then we're going to start talking about speculation and that sort of thing, something that Jay can't comment on, and then we'll open it up to questions, okay? So why don't you tell us about how X-Wing, the X-Wing game was developed?
Well, first, because I've got the mic and you can't stop me, I'm going to give a little context leading into this about how this kind of fell in my lap. So there have been rumors and speculation at Fantasy Flight Games for a while now, and everyone had thought maybe we'd be able to get the license, maybe something with Star Wars. We're thinking, that's never going to happen, right? Hasbro does that, other people do that. That's for other people, not for us. We'll be content working on our games. Well, the rumors have been swirling around for a while, and I'm thinking, man, it would be really cool. But if it comes to us at Fantasy Flight Games, there were much more seasoned game designers already there, or they had relationships with people like Kevin Wilson and Eric Lang and other designers who had been there much longer, or who had a longer working relationship. But we had been living in the Twin Cities for a while. I had relocated there to work on some things, and we wanted a cat. So we went to the local shelter. We had looked at some cats, and I decided, you know what? We should adopt the cat. Yeah, we should. And we're walking around, and suddenly my phone rings. And I get it, and it's Michael Hurley, who is one of the wonderful managers there, who goes, Jay, we got Star Wars. You're going to be designing our flagship game, X-Wing. Like, you've got to be kidding me. What, like nobody else in the company was available? Really? Me? Are you sure? Yeah. You dialed the right number. Yeah. There's nobody else named Jay in the company. And it was great. I was nervous, like I started sweating, got cold, and like, wait, I've had one heart attack before. Okay, I don't have a pinching feeling in my left armpit. And so that was so cool. And I hung up and told my wife, and she was really excited, and we look up, and I kid you not, the cat in front of us was this jet black cat named Jedi. And so we called the woman over and we're like, you've got to be kidding me, right? This cat's name is Jedi. They named it Jedi. Oh, yeah. Because he was a stray outside, and every day we would put food out for him. And he'd come back and we'd say, oh, look, it's the Return of the Jedi. So, okay, that's it. We're adopting this cat. The Force is strong with this one. And it was weird because just everything seemed to fall in place for X-Wing. But it wasn't just that. When we started working on X-Wing, we had a very, very short turnaround for what's called a proof of concept. And the proof of concept is being able to put together the bare minimum of the components and the rules to be able to showcase, does this concept work? Is this what you want us to continue working on before we put in too much more time into this particular idea? And for the first time in my life, the first proof of concept was the one that they pulled the trigger on and said, yes, this is what we want you to commit the next couple of months on fleshing out to see, are we going to go forward with this as a broader design? And it was really exciting because I already had a dial system in place for that first one. We had started to work on some maneuvering that was going to take place. Now, granted, a lot had changed. Some of the combat system changed dramatically with that, but the inkling was there, and I still have a shoebox filled with that very, very first proof of concept. And it's really exciting for me to go back to that and open it up every once in a while and to put it out there next to what the game is. And yes, it's incredibly different, but to be able to go, wow, you can see it's almost like looking at generations and generations and how long has it been since and how did it get from here to there. And so one point I really want to impress on everybody in this room is just how much of a team effort any game project is, whether it's physical or digital, but no more so than with a project of this scale and magnitude, particularly with this license. More people in the company were involved than for any product that I had ever worked on, and more people's fingerprint was evident. So a perfect example How many people on the plastic base, you know those little plastic nubs at the beginning and end of the base? I did not think of that. It was actually someone in the production department. Somebody who coordinates with the producers to make sure that the components are right, that we're getting the right materials to print things. He's like, you know, I think there's an opportunity here. It's not going to cost us any additional money to be able to put these little nibs on it, but if you have these templates, think about how much easier it's going to be to line everything out, and think about all the questions we can avoid, and for tournament play, think about how much easier it's going to be for consistency. And I'm like, that is brilliant. None of the designers would have thought of that because we weren't thinking about that. We were thinking a little bit closer here, and the developers were thinking in a different, but the producers saw that and looked at that opportunity, and it was amazing. There were people on staff who had to learn 3D modeling from the bottom up, had never worked in 3D modeling before, and the first ship that they got was the Millennium Falcon. No.
You guys know how gorgeous that model is, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's gorgeous.
It's amazing. So that goes out to a fabulous artist at FFG, Jason Bedoin, and it's incredible, the level of detail. And he worked harder and longer hours to get the Millennium Falcon. And so many people at FFG, as you can imagine, are so dedicated to Star Wars that they were not willing to do anything less than the absolute best that they could. And so he worked so hard, so tirelessly on the Falcon. And it looks amazing because he would not stop until it looked amazing. And so I have friends who are not gamers at all that got the Millennium Falcon just to put it at their desk at work. Like, does anybody have friends that did that? For Christmas one year, I just got it for a couple people just to be able to put it at their desk and things like that. It's a gorgeous figure. So, you know, big team effort. A lot of people worked on it. And it's really a testament to just how many people were involved and how passionate they were. One of the biggest challenges working with any license, and even more so for Star Wars, are expectations. The expectations are high because fans expect certain things when you're dealing with a license. They want a certain level of fidelity. Art needs to look a certain way. Colors need to be a certain way. One of the earlier licenses that I worked with in my design career was Major League Baseball. And they've got high expectations too. Each team has a very specific logo, and those logos use very specific Pantone colors. Players, because of the player association, need specific skin and hair tones. So those are pretty high standards that you have to stay with. Well, that was easy compared to Lucasfilm. The level of detail that they required, but that's not just Lucasfilm, that's Christian Peterson, the CEO of Fantasy Flight Games, because he's such a diehard fan, but he's also a business person. And it's also all of the other people who were playtesting it for us, because we're all fans. And then it's also all of you who are going to be paying money for it, and who are going to want to play this in tournaments, or buy it to play with their kids, or to play with their friends. Because everyone has expectations with Star Wars. One of the tricky things is everybody looks at Star Wars slightly differently. And that's where one of the other interesting anecdotes comes in. When we first released the game, one of the biggest outcries occurred with the miniatures of the TIE fighters. Just your basic run-of-the-mill TIE fighters. With the actual model. Do you know the story? Have you heard this one before?
No, I haven't heard this one, no.
Half of the fans out there were arguing that we got the dimensions wrong. They were arguing that the dimensions were wrong. Now, my first response is, I don't think Lucas would have let us make it if the dimensions were wrong. Well, that's because certain people went to Wikipedia and thought that Wikipedia was the correct source for this information. Well, they weren't necessarily wrong, because there had been different dimensions published in different Star Wars media over the years. Well, to make sure that we were getting things accurately, there had been some unprecedented access to the actual models used in the making of the film, to be able to get direct measurements. And found out that different model makers had made models of slightly different sizes and dimensions. So we had to, or not me, I was not involved in that part, thank goodness. There had to be a discussion about, well, which is the actual TIE fighter. So the ones that you see in the base set and the other TIE fighters that were produced ended up being what's the canonical TIE fighter going forward. And it's just amazing that Star Wars means so many things to different people because it is so many different things. And when you get to the role-playing part, which is a completely different story in that, it just underscores, is Star Wars about the Force? Is Star Wars about the struggle of the Rebel and the Empire? Is Star Wars about this seedy, hives of scum and villainy? What is the Star Wars experience? And X-Wing only models and expresses this one facet of Star Wars. Well, one reason that I think that we really did a good job is whenever I go to a tournament, depending on the current meta at the time, you may see certain builds that are particularly strong, like early on it was the TIE Swarms. But even if you saw a lot of TIE Swarms, there were some differences in there. There might be a different combination, or maybe there were 6 TIE Swarms or 7 TIE Swarms. So there were some different configurations, but you would still see representatives of just about every model that had been released up to that day. I went through like wave 5 or 6 when I would see things. I would just about see every ship in one of them. When I was over at the UK watching their tournaments, it was amazing. Yes, there were certain things that were more evident, but you'd see just about everything there. And that's really exciting to see that the basic framework that we built was a strong enough engine that even years later, when I was no longer involved in the game, and it had been handed off to the developers who, years later, people like James Niffen and, oh gosh, I can't even think of all the people now that it's been handed to, Alex Davey and all these other people over the years, have taken that and been able to produce all these ships that are still balanced and point costs are the same and things that work together and can mix and match. And then once the Scum and Villainy faction was introduced, that these still play, and whether you're being casual, whether you're playing in a tournament, that you can still feel that you're competitive with an investment. And that brings another interesting story. I can't even guess at how many times I've had people come up and say, I can't believe you charge that much money for a figure. And half of them mean, I can't believe you charge that much. And half of them mean, I can't believe that's all you charge. Which is cool because it falls right into this area of casual gamers think that that's an awful lot to spend. I'm getting one miniature. But with the cards you're getting all of this gameplay and it's pre-assembled and pre-painted. And then you've got grognards or veteran gamers who are used to buying, assembling, priming, and painting. Going, it comes pre-assembled and it looks that good. And I'm not just buying one unit that comes with one card that I have to actually glue and epoxy myself and then try to, I played 40K until I dropped $500 on a Necron army that got, retro. Oh God, that was the most.
That's the next panel.
You're not happy with Games Workshop? This is unheard of. Completely unprecedented.
It was the first time I had dropped that much money, and the first time I had gotten to play. I spent $500 on a Necron army. I won the very first battle I played. Everyone at the game shop refused to play against that army again. And then 2 months later, the new book came out. Wow! That was an interesting moment. But it also informed how I wanted to do miniatures from that point on. So it was interesting. I mean, what an experience that influenced how I view miniatures and going forward. I do want to talk about miniatures, and Spencer knows more about this than I do, but I actually was interviewed just about materials that go into making a game. And talking about the miniatures was really an interesting decision. And we talked about how the bases being clear and the posts being clear was interesting. But talking about the actual materials that make up the ships was really interesting because I don't know exactly what type of materials go in there. But it was amazing to me how thin some of those elements are, but how structurally, they've got a pretty good structural integrity for how small, narrow, and thin they are, as long as you treat them with respect. Now, if a 6-year-old or a dog gets a hold of them, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to hold up to that. But it has this really nice blend of holding the structure, but still being flexible enough and extremely lightweight. I mean, when you're working with models that are going to have very, very narrow or thin pieces, and you're going to have to avoid undercuts and things like that, what goes into figuring out a material that's going to be sturdy, but flexible and not cost too much?
Yeah. So I mean, when we start looking at what it's going to cost to put something together, obviously we don't do pre-painted.
Right.
We're not FFG, dog. So we also don't got that Star Wars license. So when we start looking at our single color plastics, like PVC is pretty much our go-to. We do a miniature game called Wrath of Kings, which is kind of the old school style. You get a box of miniatures. They're all arms and legs and torsos, and you glue them together and stuff like that. But when we did that, one of the things that we tried to do that we feel was not super revolutionary, but was a little bit of avant-garde for it, was that we did say, hey, the entire line is going to be plastic. It's going to be PVC. Was mixed with the polyurethane you use on the weapons, because swords and small pieces need to actually have flexibility for a lot of reasons. Number one, if it's sticking out from a miniature, that's the number one thing that your hand's going to clip when you go to pick it up, right? If you're going to put your hand on top of a miniature, your fingers on top of a miniature, 9 times out of 10 you're going to hit that sword. And if that thing's brittle and it's going to snap, it's just going to sit there and break over and over again, right? And so, especially if you're doing plastic, I mean, it's one thing if you're doing metal resin or even just straight old school resin, it's going to have more strength to it, but it's also going to cost more. It's going to be harder to assemble. It's going to weigh a lot. And I mean, in resin, where the cost for things, we're living in a really weird age right now, right? Because of games like X-Wing, the barrier to entry into miniature games and even board games with miniatures that play kind of like miniature games is falling to the wayside, right? And the market is moving into a way that I wouldn't be surprised if within the next 10 to 15 years you see the same type of growth and mentality of it's not weird to be a tabletop gamer anymore, right? It's not this kind of like, you're in your mom's basement. When I grew up playing Nintendo, the idea was you're in your mom's basement playing Nintendo. You're the nerd at school, right? And now, you can even see it at DragonCon. You go down into the Hilton's basement where we have all the games doing demos and stuff like that.
It's just a basement.
It's just the only place they can put it, guys. It's a big convention.
The difference being the lights are on in this basement.
Yeah, and your mom's out there, right? I mean, your mom might be there. I don't know your mom. You tell me, dog. Also, I'm single. CoolMiniOrNot. Just no.
You're not living that anymore, right?
The thing is, the climate and the mentality is changing. So we are living in an age where video games were social, right? At one point in time, it was couch competitive, couch co-op, couch play, right? And then it became multiplayer, and with that, you kind of got a bigger audience, a bigger group of people to play with, and so of course, it became a little bit more widely accepted to be a gamer, right? And that acceptance in video game has, I think, almost made board game and tabletop gaming progress to being like, now I kind of do want to sit around with my 5 friends and not just play Call of Duty or not just play whatever the new game is, right? But I also want to sit down and have a night where we drink beer and move miniatures around the table.
Oh, no, I think we've already seen that.
Yeah.
I mean, I run a board game club at my local school. I ran a Star Wars Jedi camp for summer school. We fought each other's lightsabers and stuff like that. And a lot of the kids that we talk to, they're like, yeah, I'm tired of staring at a screen. I want to have fun with my friends and have social time. But
and I don't want to exercise.
That too. But I like Dragon Age, but I don't want to stare at a screen. hey, what is this thing? Is kind of retro. What is this? You know, like so. There's this retro appeal to it as well.
And well, the importance to that, where I was going with all that is, now that the market is bigger, we can start doing things like mass producing X-Wing games and board games, and we make thousands of copies of Zombicide, right? And this is like numbers that like maybe 30 years ago, like Hasbro was maybe doing, right?
I think one of the biggest things that would surprise people who are not in the game industry would be the whole concept of economies of scale and print runs.
Yes.
So a print run of 500 copies of something could be enormous for one company,
Yes.
and for another company, they couldn't afford to do something that low. You're talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. For something on Kickstarter, I mean, Exploding Cats did how many million did they have?
8 million. Well, the $8 million, and they did 100.
Well, it took almost an entire shipping container from China.
Yeah.
You know, it's
On a small box game, right? Yeah.
and how much it costs to ship things. You have to play Tetris on a boat from China in the shipping containers to get things to fit properly. And the most expensive thing you can do is a book. So the Star Wars role-playing books are so expensive that you can't ship them all over at once because they weigh too much. So you have to put it in a shipment with boxes that have empty space.
Yeah. The catch-22 of a book is, the book's cheap, but then it weighs too much.
Yep.
And then the weight starts factoring into how you're going to be able to ship it, and then you go, it's like t-shirts. You don't ever want to make, if you guys ever think about doing a Kickstarter, don't make t-shirts. Also, try to get away from books, because everything just costs money, man. It's just...
You want things that have a lot of empty...
Yeah. You know what's good? Board games, dog. Card games are pretty dope, too.
Packing peanuts. That's...
Yeah.
What's interesting too, Kickstarter kind of changes people's perspectives as well. Not always for the good.
Always for the best.
It's interesting. So in addition to game design, I also travel out and talk about game design, and I also teach game design at UW Stout in Menominee, Wisconsin. And I ran a summer camp for prospective, there were high school juniors and seniors who were considering going to college, and it was basically designing the future. It was, how can games help prepare you for college? And it was really cool. It was incredibly successful, and these students hadn't been playing games before, and they're like, oh, I learned a little bit about math. I learned a little bit about order of operations. I can see how this could apply to other things. And it was like seeing a light bulb go off that games apply to a lot. For me, it was how I learned to read. It was how I learned to do math. It was how, as odd as it may seem, social skills.
Yeah.
Okay, so at this time, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. All right, right here.
Can you talk about the early combat mechanics and how they evolved over time?
I can only talk so much about it. But what I can talk is I can talk about the basic metric. So early on, when we were talking about combat, we had to figure out how are we going to know when we have combat right. And so we had to basically come up with an equation. What needed to happen in order for us to feel that combat was right? So in order to do that, I had to do a lot of research, which meant, sorry honey, I've got to watch A New Hope again tonight. So basically I had to watch Star Wars over and over and over and over again. But really, looking at the dogfights in those movies was interesting, because one thing that we started to notice over and over, and my kids were really helpful with this, because I had seen the movie so many times that when you become so familiar with something, it's easy to overlook things. And what we noticed is, other than a few instances, a TIE fighter is almost killed in one shot all the time. Whereas sometimes an X-Wing can take a hit, especially if a named character is flying. Amazing how that happens, isn't it? But we're like, no, that means something, doesn't it? So we decided that we needed to come up with a system that, with a good shot, an X-Wing should be able to one-hit a TIE fighter, which meant we had to figure out what a good shot meant. Does that mean a good attack with a bad defense? Or where do we go from there? And it was, okay, how long do we want a game to last? What are we going to include in the base set? Okay, the base set's going to be one X-Wing and two TIE fighters. We know that. Now, one X-Wing and two TIE fighters, and a TIE fighter could die in a good shot, and we want this game to last about how long? So as we started to learn more information about what the core game was going to be, we were able to kind of fill in the variables to that equation. So, all right, we've got a Luke Skywalker card. Let's assume it's Luke Skywalker against these guys. Luke Skywalker's going to be able to take a couple hits. So now we work and we're getting more information, and we would play until we felt that Luke Skywalker is going to be able to survive more often than not against no names, but then you start to ramp up the TIE fighters before you start adding other cards to it. And you know, you kind of lift the other side up a little bit, then lift the other side up a little bit. All right, now let's start to add in the point values, because this is before you start to assign points to anything. We just want to see, we're playing around with numbers, we're playing around with the distribution of icons on dice, before you even start to think about assigning values to anything. And we just start to play around, and this side's a little high. Okay, then we'll increase this side. Oh, too much? Well then, do we decrease this one or increase this one? And it's this really interesting balancing act until we finally feel that, oh, we're at the right level here. All right, so if this is our equation, and we're now happy that one X-Wing is equal to two TIE fighters, now from here, let's see if this math can apply to the other things that we want in wave one. Because the other part of this is we need to make sure that these numbers are high enough so that when we start to talk about something like a Y-Wing, if our numbers are this low, then a Y-Wing may be too high on our scale already, and we can't go below an X-Wing and do something like an A-Wing. So we have to set the baseline high enough that we can go both above it and below it. So it was a really interesting balancing act to get there, and then start to worry about the point values. But what's interesting about the core set is there are actually 3 layers of rules. When you open up the core set, the very first thing you see are the quick start rules. So before you start worrying about the everything that's in the box, it says grab this card, grab these minis, set this up, boom, here we go. The quick start rules were actually based on having several of the people at work bringing their kids in on the weekends and having the kids play. Can our kids open up the game, get the quick start rules out, and teach each other how to play? And can they play? And at the time, my older boy was 8, and Steve Horvath, our VP of Marketing, his older boy was, I think, 7 or 8 as well. And could my 8-year-old teach somebody else how to play? One of the other employees there. And could our kids teach someone else there how to play? And it was cool. It was magical. Like the eyes light up, and you can see them, and they get it, and it starts working like, oh.
I don't know what that go. How would I do that? That's what I'm asking. How would I? I was saying nothing. Did you say something FFG didn't want you to say, man? Years everywhere, they know.
Apparently I'm done. That was weird.
All right, next question, over here.
Yeah, it's Travis with Less Than Geek. Can you elaborate a bit on just kind of like the, I guess the hierarchy of like who's kind of designing the game now or moving forward, like Alex Davies, I think, just kind of taking over on it, and Frank, and anybody else here mentioned, and I guess like you mentioned the stroke earlier, I guess was kind of the catalyst for that transition probably, or just anything kind of as far as that goes.
Unfortunately, I can't comment on the current state of the game since I'm no longer involved with them. But I do know that it's awfully fun to go back and visit with everybody and kind of see where things are, and to be able to see that the core game that we came up with at the beginning is still the equation that they're using, that all the work that went into it, the spreadsheets, the math that we did, that all the time and effort that we put in, it's still the same game, and that game can still be applied to all the new ships that we see, all the new pilots that we see. Yes, we're adding new things, and some of them, here's another thing that a lot of people need to understand, and this is easily apparent when you're talking about like a CCG and maybe some board games. When you're designing the core game, you're also designing the first several expansions at the same time. Because you need to assume that what you're doing is going to be extensible and forward compatible. Because if you're not doing that out of the box, you're already crippling yourself. So we were designing forward already because we knew it needed to be flexible enough to account for so many different things. So we were designing outwards far enough to be able to cast a pretty wide net, but even beyond that, seeing that it was going to be able to apply further and further and further down the road. It was interesting because about a year ago, it started to get to the ships that I was hoping would make it in, but since I was no longer working with FFG, I did not have the insider knowledge of, but I would go there and I would see, oh, they are working on that, you know? But I can't comment on anything current or otherwise.
Okay, right here.
Can you talk about that core set? Because you talked a little bit about how you knew the core set was going to be an X-Wing and a TIE Fighter. What kind of decisions, how did that come together in terms of what was in that core set, in terms of dice and pilots? Because we saw a lot of different pilots for the X-Wings and TIEs later. Because I would think if you're going more, this is going to be not just gamer, but more mass market too. Why is it not Luke versus Vader in your core set? How did all those decisions get made?
Can't comment on all of that, but I do think that for a lot of people, if you look at, especially A New Hope, which is probably the entry point for what most people would consider classically for Star Wars, New Hope is the main entry, and you look at the majority of dogfights, you're going to see X-Wing against TIE Fighter more often than not. And if the X-Wing is the most iconic ship, knowing that the Millennium Falcon is too big to put into the core set, then the TIE Fighter makes the most sense. So if you're going to have the TIE Fighter, can you put a TIE Advanced or any other sort of TIE in there along with a basic TIE Fighter? And if that's not the case, so then looking back at our equation, what makes sense to go in there? Aside from that, a lot of it is basically component-wise, what do we need to put in there? From a business standpoint, while I can't speak too much onto it, you also know that just like with a collectible card game, you can only put so much in there for value. You also need to think about what do we need to not put in so that they're going to want to keep invested in interest. Because you've got to make this a product that if they enjoy this, we hope that they'll also enjoy that. I mean, that's just business. But I also do think that power level, you're thinking about Luke, and yes, he's incredibly powerful. Well, if Vader's also going to be that mega powerful, or Han Solo being that mega powerful, I mean, there are also these power thresholds. So if we only go super high and super low, then what the middle then doesn't seem very interesting, attractive, or present. Variety, I think, is probably the best answer.
All right, over here.
It seems like X-Wing has a lot of, I guess they're calling them Legends ships now, so I imagine that a lot of the staff are big fans of the old video games. Is there like a whiteboard somewhere where everyone just puts like ships they liked from old, like, because we've seen Dark Forces, we've seen X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. So
what I can say is that is a very, very common thing to do in a lot of different gaming companies that I have seen done often.
So that's not a deny.
I carefully worded that.
Real quick, you guys have seen the, okay, Jay, you did not say this or make any comment on this. You guys have seen the leaked pictures of the new ships, right?
It's not leaked.
Oh, it's out.
No. The leaked, okay, it's out, right. Did you see well, before it came out, did you see it when it leaked?
Yeah.
Okay. Just checking out before so they probably don't care about those pictures being out now. But there's a lot of cool like hints about the new movies in there. There's a like.
It's on the website.
The picture of the box is not the only thing in those photos.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just
Exactly.
saying.
Yeah, there's an asteroid. It's huge.
Okay, over here.
I noticed you got a Rebel Legion badge.
Yes.
What's your costume? Or is it an honorary one?
It's
If
an honorary
it's totally
one.
earned it.
So that's one of my proudest accomplishments, actually. They surprised me with a membership for developing X-Wing and the Star Wars roleplay line.
Well, as a representative, I'm sure James would appreciate it.
Yeah, that's for both.
I was very, very excited. I did want to be in the 501st as well, but they did not. So Thank you.
I might be able to talk something.
But you know, Weird Al is too, so.
Yeah, there you go.
Weird Al and I have yet one more thing in common.
And the shirts.
Good point.
What do you think of it?
Okay, over here.
Me? Yeah. Okay. So when you talk about, designing the formula for the base game that's going to be something that's very healthy and lives on for future iterations when other people come and work on it, one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that the mechanics actually got licensed by WizKids for like at least a couple other games now. There's like a Star Trek and a D&D thing. Were you involved at all or consulted on those? How you could take the game and implement it?
No, not at all. Those were licensed from WizKids through Fantasy Flight Games. I believe for Attack Wing, I have been credited as the flight path developer designer. I'm not sure. But what's interesting is I had actually worked at WizKids for several years earlier on in my career.
Like, to that end, then just as a especially since you're not affiliated technically with FFG now, like if there's any one property out there that you would kind of like to see some of the X-wing dogfighting mechanics taken to and kind of rewrapped and done something neat with.
So back when I was with WizKids, it was during the real big height where HeroClix was at its earliest era. WizKids was coming out with Mage Knight 2.0 and stuff like that. Shadowrun Duels was coming out, but Crimson Skies was its big. Crimson Skies and the Mech Warrior series was coming out. I love Crimson Skies. Absolutely loved it. I would have loved to have seen a Crimson Skies with the flight path system, but still using a clicky base. I thought that would have been really, really cool.
Awesome, for sure.
Okay, up in front.
Hey, just want to say thank you, first of all, because this has actually got me into tabletop gaming. I went from having never played a single tabletop game in my life to now just...
Hey, check out CoolMiniOrNot. We make great games.
Now, there are a lot of other great, like he was saying, entry point games for people that otherwise maybe would have been intimidated by it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to me, that's the thing with X-Wing is that you get models that look great. You guys get rid of fucking rulers. Excuse me, rulers, which is the number one thing. Yeah. The first time you see somebody pull out a ruler when they're playing Warhammer or anything, you're just like, no, that ain't for me at all. No, thank you.
See, now I'm sad.
So to me, when you see X-Wing, you see just the templates and everything is in the reveal, right? That idea that like I've outsmarted you because I've predicted what you're going to do. That's the hook to me, right? Like when you have that, you go boom. So yeah, I think it's
And I have to add, because it's my husband and I that play it, and it's a great activity.
Tell her it's okay to play Rebel every now and then.
It's great, but I want to say thank you because I've gone from never playing a tabletop game to having the Imperial Raider waiting for me at home. So I'm pretty excited about that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I'd love to know, are you able to talk about what is your personal favorite ship that is in the game? Something that you've maybe worked on or just your favorite?
Instead of my personal favorite ship, my personal favorite maneuver is the barrel roll. It was just like early on, it was one of those abilities that we knew we wanted in, but we weren't sure how we were going to implement it, because there were a lot of different ways we could have done it. And again, this is another example of, it was somebody else's idea that when I saw it, I'm like, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? No, and that's great. It was one of the other people while we were playing. I'm like, that's great. I don't see why that isn't the one we should use. Just another great example of how other people's ideas really went into this and helped. I'm very fortunate that my name is on the front, and I do feel a lot of ownership for many of the things, but again, so many people worked on this. If anybody here goes to Gen Con or to PAX or to any other convention where they see people from Fantasy Flight Games and they have a booth, please, please, please thank them for their involvement with this game as well, especially if you get the Force Awakened core set, because boy, a lot of work went into that, especially to keep it all under wraps. Also, just one more thing, one of my favorite things about X-Wing, and another reason why I think we did it well, when I go past a big table of people who are playing or already downstairs, and I hear people using lines or sound effects.
Oh, yeah.
Great, don't get cocky. I mean, I love that. That tells me that we're doing it, that there's that level of immersion, that they feel that this is a Star Wars game. You know?
That brings me a question to you, Spencer. What do you see in your gaming community, you know, just talking about just miniature gaming in general, with X-Wing? Because what I'm seeing is there are people who play at the tournament level, but then there are a lot of casual gamers as well who like the game as well. Like my kids play it, that sort of thing. So I think that you hit on one of the reasons why it has a broad appeal. What's your experience with, you know, where you see it out in public and that sort of thing?
So wait, rephrase it.
So okay, no problem. Let's rephrase the question. What context do you see it in when you're out and about throwing dice and that sort of thing? Do you see more tournament play? Do you see
Our properties?
No,
With
like
X-Wing?
just with X-Wing.
X-Wing?
With X-Wing.
Yeah, I see. Oh, I'm a casual player. Okay, so I see it casually, like because I don't do anything tournament based because I didn't play sports growing up, so I don't want competition. I like to everybody be winners.
Actually, let's take a quick poll. Who here plays mostly casual?
So,
Who here plays mostly tournament? Not bad.
yeah, pretty good. That's actually good. Because usually, what you see in the market basically is that you're going to have somebody who goes, I like Star Wars, I'll give it a shot. And then they like the game enough to kind of keep buying every once in a while. So to see your percentage is actually pretty high for tournament level players.
Oh yeah,
It's a
that's
good game, though, so.
pretty good.
Yeah.
You'll get it higher, obviously, in the convention because there are
Oh, for
often
sure, yeah,
events
yeah,
that are
yeah.
going to.
Okay, right over here.
You made a point about casual and what have you, and I picked it up because it was Star Wars that looked cool. It was like, what effect has designing X-Wing or any other game had on, I don't know, the other parts of your life? Like, I've known this fool since high school, but the other people on this, we're the local crowd. I met them all because of this game. I run a web show that is, I run an X-Wing web show. We broadcast live X-Wing every 2 weeks, and it's because of this game, and it's awesome. And I was like, how's it affected you? Because I met a lot of cool people. I have people who watch me in other countries, and it's, you know, there are 15 people who watch me every week, and it's awesome. So what kind of attention do you get because of it?
I love that it's brought me enough. I mean, really, you wouldn't have brought me here without having an accent. You probably wouldn't even known who I am. No, the best thing it's done is it's allowed me to be able to travel and talk about not only this, but game design and other game topics, because I'm so passionate about this hobby. I love being able to share what I've learned over the years. I've been in game design for a very, very long time, and this has helped me get opportunities to do more game design as a freelancer, but then also travel and teach, which I love to do.
Okay, back here.
I don't know if you're going to know anything about this, but the new core set comes out with a new damage deck that, according to what I've read, that's what I thought. You have no answers?
Can we speculate?
No, go ahead, yes, let's speculate. Okay, so according to what you
Let's see
read.
how much it sweats, guys. Come on.
Because the new core set has that damage deck that has to be used in tournament play. Are they planning on releasing just that damage deck?
No idea.
So, okay, I'm going to speculate. I'm going to speculate no.
What?
I'm going to speculate no.
They're gonna make you buy the course. You gotta buy a new course? Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Casually plays, dog.
All right, I got 50 cents.
Nice.
Right there. Okay, back there?
You had mentioned that you watched A New Hope a lot to kind of help get in the mood for how to design mechanics. Did you take any inspiration from like the old X-Wing, like the original PC game from LucasArts or anything like that, or TIE Fighter?
Yeah, and even the Old Republic, first Knights of the Old Republic, but then also the Old Republic MMO,
Okay.
and their flight mission things. I mean, I'm a Star Wars geek. Pretty much any opportunity that I've had to experience Star Wars across games and different media, I've done. But still, of all of them, Empire Strikes Back is still my favorite of all the movies. But A New Hope is still up there and special to me too, so.
All right, over here.
So we've seen like fixes for A-Wings and fixes for TIE Advances that come out in future waves. And it's kind of like, well, we kind of screwed up on the A-Wing, we'll fix it. Are there any like elements that you kind of regret in the game, like should have done boost a little bit differently, or maybe given an ability to a certain pilot or something?
that hawk
That's really
edge
hard to
right
say, because when you come down to it, the point ranges that we have are so small
Right.
that it doesn't take much of rounding for it to have been off by just one rounding up or down. Could have been all it needed, or having it slightly larger or smaller. So hindsight being 50-50 based on the amount of playtesting that takes place. I don't regret anything that we've done up to this point, because at the time we made the right decisions. And also, and this is very mercenary of me, both while I was full-time and even as a freelancer, I did what I was asked to do, and I did it to the absolute best of my ability. And afterward it shows that I made some mistakes, but I did the absolute best that I could.
Which is absolutely awesome, by the way.
As from a publisher, speaking from a publisher as well, the game's never done, right?
Yeah.
At one point in time, you just go, the deadline's coming up, I gotta pull the trigger. And you know there's always gonna be something that you look at and go like, that could have been like better. Like with us, there's always one or two things, right?
A good example is, so I designed Blood Bowl Team Manager, the card game, and they released an FAQ that nerfed a couple cards, and those were cards that I had made notes on that I wanted to change. Well, my stroke, which I mentioned earlier, was before it got submitted for final approval, and those cards ended up printing as is because they didn't have access to my notes. And it wasn't until after I recovered and I found out that those had never been corrected. And so those got printed, and of course they were wonky, and of course they had to get, retro, but it's just, you never know. Now that is an obscure event that probably does not take place frequently, God, I hope not, amongst other game development, but weird stuff like that happens. And those were changes that nobody could have possibly seen that got out there. But like, do I regret it? Yeah, but I still did the best that I could do given the conditions
That game is still legit, though. That's a legit game. All right, over here.
Yes, was X-Wing always a point-based army building game, or at some point in early development, was it something that had like a campaign book, like Descent or Imperial Assault, where you had fixed missions that kind of play through, that sort of thing? Has it always been kind of a tournament style game?
So, that's a tough question to answer, because I've played so many different dogfighting or aerial fighting games that were influences, and we built the best dogfighting game that we could, and then we looked at how can we, extend this and what makes the most sense. For example, one of my favorites, like I mentioned Crimson Skies before, but my favorite dogfighting game, or I guess spaceship game of all time, might be Silent Death by Iron Crown. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with that. And that was great not only for individual fights, but they had this phenomenal campaign system. And because you could use the ships so well in both, I wanted to make sure that what we created you could really use for both. FFG also has such a wonderful track record of an excellent organized play system that I knew that it needed to be an option. So if we're already working with all of this math and we're already creating something that needs to have a balance, and in order for this to be balanced, if we're going to use dice, if we're going to have armor in terms of the shields and the hull, and if we know we're going to have these ratings, then we're already going to have the math in place to make sure that it has the balance that we want. And then there's still some, design discretion, especially when you talk about the soft things like the abilities. Then a point system isn't that far off to be able to assume we're also going to want to do. So then let's go ahead and create a point system just as an internal balance, because then if we only ever use it as a design tool, then we can plug all of our numbers in, and if we get two ships that both come out as arbitrarily 30-point ships, and we use them in various scenarios and go, there is no way that these two ships are the same price, then it's a valuable tool just for us internally. So, I mean, it makes sense to use that, and that's not just with X-Wing, but that's a valuable tool. If you've got those elements already present in your game, take advantage of it.
So there's never like a Rogue Squadron campaign system that this game was originally intended for, like that?
Boy, that is a great question. Man, that's really interesting.
Fair enough.
Real quick, Spencer, when you're developing games and things like that, do you have internal numbers or things that are not revealed to the audience?
Yeah,
things like that?
because because at the end of the day, what you put, like, so a perfect example is, and Jake can probably speak a little bit to this too as well, is that at the end of the day, what you want to put in front of the player is something so streamlined that they don't have to sit there and ask a lot of questions, right? They can, the cliche is easy to learn, impossible to master, difficult to master. The idea is that you want to have something so streamlined. So for example, we're working with a company, right, or a guy right now who is designing a game for us. And he has already got this game designed, right? And he has an interesting license that we're talking to him that he kind of controls. And he's got this player dashboard that has all these cool like stats. And it's probably like 7 stats. It's almost like the special system from Fallout, if you're familiar, right? It's all these stats that all have these own numbers. And I'm looking at it and going like this guy's intelligence is 8, right? Which means he can do these other things better. But really that just needs to be boiled down to a perk that's like, he has the lockpicking master. So that means he gets to roll the dice twice. Because if I look at this 8 and then I have to go to a guidebook and say 8 means you get to roll the dice twice as opposed to once, I'm giving you another hurdle basically, right? Because look, man, it used to be you sat down and you read a rule book, and the next night you played the game. Now you load up a YouTube video and you play the game while you watch the YouTube video, right? Because at the end of the day, you buy a product. We live in a world where Vines, people are making money off of 10-second video clips. We are instant satisfaction now, right? You want to buy that box, you want to open it up, and you want to start playing within the next 10 weeks, right? And you don't want to have to ask a lot of questions.
Well, also, I think that traditional, I mean, when I see new kids and new players come in, they're used to like, okay, she's letters. I'll teach you how to play this in 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they're used to that barrier of entry.
So to kind of loop that back around to say, there are numbers that we discreetly hide from the end user. We know that this thing has a certain bell curve, this ability or this character has a certain bell curve. He falls here, here, here. And if it was a point-based system, I mean, the point-based system works so well with X-Wing too because then you can do things with the pilots and stuff like that. Because obviously you guys like Luke's 15 points. Like, oh, dog, that's not right. You know what I mean? Like, so it's stuff like that where there's sometimes we do like Pro and Bones is a MOBA style game like League of Legends or Dota. There's so many numbers we had, right, about how the minions moved, how many minions you could have on the board at the same time, how many of the heavy-hitting minions you could have, and then what kind of abilities your characters have. And like 3 versions of that game that we showed off by the way, CoolMiniOrNot is local to Atlanta. So we do our own convention here in Atlanta. Actually, we're at the Hyatt next year in March, and no, in May. And so we had the game there like a year ago, and Tom, you guys know who Tom Vassell is, right? The guy that does all the reviews and stuff. He played the game and was like, nope. And we were like, what's the problem? He's like, these numbers are, why are these numbers surfaced? There's so much going on. And literally we went back and we're like, these numbers can't be surfaced, this can't be surfaced, this can't be. And the game is much more streamlined than it was a year ago, right?
So one of the things that I do when I'm teaching students, instead of like show your math, we say hide your math.
Yeah.
The end user should not see that. So a lot of people don't like the customization that I use in some of my role-playing games because they want to add up and calculate and perfectly know statistically. And I'm like, no, dude. You want to know if you hit. You want to know, did this work? Did that not work? Not, do I have a 17% chance of this? I'm like, no, never tell me the odds, You
know that we're seeing now on our board games that custom dice are being received better than a D6. They'd rather have a D3 that has cool symbols on it. Basically like a D6 with 2 sides, 2 sides, 2 sides. Because now it's just yes or no, right? Pass, fail. Because I honestly think that the tabletop community is moving away from the legacy of the Warhammers and the D&D and stuff like that. It is a mainstream crowd just wants to know yes or no, right? Green or red. So.
We have time for one, possibly 2 more. All right, so right here.
So what are some of the challenges you're making the games more compatible? Say you have a pilot and a core set and you're creating upgrade cards going down the road. So how do you kind of balance the new abilities that come in with that with old pilots? So, you have new abilities that's greater on pilot A as opposed to pilot B. Those 3 points are just better here and there. So how do you kind of balance that out?
So overall, whenever you're building forward, it's hard, if not impossible, to make sure that what you're building now is completely compatible with every single thing that came before. Often I talk about a moving window. So basically you've got to look, so if this is what we're working on now, then one before and one behind is now 2 ahead and 2 behind, maybe 3 ahead and 3 behind. So you just got this window that you're following along with. You do your best to look forward as far as you can, and maybe the last 2 or 3, assuming that for most people that's as far back in the expansion loop, or maybe a little bit further for some games. But it's hard to predict, know, or understand exactly what the current meta in a game like this, or for something like Magic the Gathering, you might have a better idea because only certain expansions stay relevant. Or in a game that has a ton of expansions like Arkham Horror, you're assuming that people might have a base expansion and then the newest shiny, but you cannot design, nor can you stay up at night worrying about one card working with every other single card in the game. Again, that's why we have math, and hopefully it will raise red flags if there's an obvious problem, but you will have issues coming up just because you cannot perfectly predict. Hopefully though, if you've been given a project and you're now going to be working on that or be the steward of that, especially for expansions, you're comfortable enough and familiar enough with what's in that you could look at it and go, you know, I think this could be a problem for some of the Y-Wing pilots. Let's just go back through here and double check just to be sure. That's also why having a robust playtest group is critical, because no matter how well you know your game, even as a designer, your fans know it better. So when I was working on
They'll tell you that. They'll let you know.
The fans, when I was working on expansions for WizWar, Chaos in the Old World, Cosmic Encounter, they knew those games better than I ever could, because they were lifestyle games for those people. I have never played X-Wing as much as the tournament people that have been part of the playtest groups, who have memorized every single card in every single set. You know, and why not use them as a resource? They'll be able to know. It's like my kids know every single thing about Harry Potter, which book, which movie, why it's different and where it's different. You know, you've got people with that expertise, even if it's not you, and you can leverage that.
Okay, unfortunately, we have run out of time. I just want to thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it very much.
So just 2 quick things. If you want to get your X-Wing fixed while you are down here, I think they've got 12 to 15 tables down in the basement here in the Hilton. They're running some demos all week long.
Tournament tomorrow, and then 150 2v2 tournament on Sunday.
And then tomorrow, I have no event scheduled, but I will be running some role-playing sessions of my upcoming game, Catastrophe, which is going to be a survival storytelling game, trying to get your huge cast of characters to survive through some sort of horrible plot contrivance like Lost or some other thing. And if you're interested in that, all you have to do is find me downstairs tomorrow.
Down in the dungeon?
Downstairs in Mom's
Thank you guys very much.